A question about belonging. Have you ever noticed how people give up on learning English not because it is hard, but because it slowly convinces them that they don't belong anywhere? Not in their old country anymore, and not really in the new one either. You open a video like this because a small voice inside you is tired. Tired of grammar rules. Tired of repeating after native speakers who sound confident and relaxed, like life never punched them in the mouth. And maybe, just maybe, you are wondering the same question that quietly followed me for years in the United States. Where does your heart actually belong? 2 weeks ago, I stood in a quiet room in America, waiting for my naturalization ceremony. The chairs were lined up neatly. The air conditioning hummed like it always does here. Cold, efficient, emotionless. People around me looked calm, some excited, some nervous. And there I was, suddenly remembering every moment I felt lost because my English was slow, broken, and sometimes embarrassing. Funny thing is, your brain loves to replay those moments when you are about to cross a big line in life. Neuroscience calls this emotional tagging. Your brain marks painful memories with a bright red flag, just in case you ever forget who you used to be. When people say, "Just relax, your English is good enough," they don't understand how language is tied to identity. Studies in psychology show that when you speak a second language, your emotional range actually shrinks at first. You sound flatter. You joke less. You hesitate more. So you start feeling like a lower resolution version of yourself. That's when many learners quit, not because they can't understand English, but because they can't recognize themselves while using it. I remember my first winter in the US. The sky felt wider somehow, colder, heavier. In my home country, weather changes slowly, politely. In America, the climate doesn't ask for permission. It switches personalities overnight. One day sunny and friendly, the next day brutally honest. That was my first lesson in American culture, even before language. Direct. Fast. No balayé. My English at that time matched the weather, awkward pauses, sudden storms of silence, and long cold gaps where I didn't know what to say. You might think learning English is about vocabulary, but real life disagrees. Real life throws accents at you. Slang. Half-finished sentences. People talking while walking away. At the grocery store, the cashier asks, "How's it going?" And your brain freezes because you prepared for prices, not philosophy. Linguists call this processing overload. Your brain is decoding sounds, translating meaning, predicting social rules, and managing anxiety, all at the same time. Of course you feel tired. Of course you want to quit. There was a moment, standing in line at a post office years ago, when I realized something uncomfortable. I wasn't just learning English. I was learning how to exist in a country that values speed over explanation. In my culture, silence can be respectful. In America, silence often feels suspicious. So every pause in my English felt like a small failure. Not dramatic. Just constant. Like water dripping on your confidence, one drop at a time. And here's the part nobody tells you: your brain hates uncertainty more than difficulty. Research shows that humans prefer a hard task with clear rules over an easy task with social ambiguity. That's why grammar exercises feel safer than conversations. Exercises don't judge you. People do. Or at least, it feels that way. So many learners hide inside textbooks and apps, but real growth only starts when you step into messy, imperfect human interaction. As I waited for the ceremony to begin, I looked at my hands. They didn't look American. They didn't look foreign either. They looked tired. Hands that filled out forms. Held dictionaries. Typed messages slowly, checking every sentence twice. Hands that learned to love, argue, apologize, and forgive in a language that once felt like a locked door. Psychologists say identity is not something you discover, it's something you negotiate. Language is one of the toughest negotiations there is. If you're listening to this and thinking about giving up on English, let me say this gently: the discomfort you feel is not a sign of failure. It's a sign of transition. Your brain is literally rewiring itself. New neural pathways are forming, and they feel unstable at first. That awkwardness? That's growth with bad PR. No one posts videos about that stage, but everyone goes through it. This story isn't about perfection. It's about staying. Staying in conversations you don't fully understand. Staying in a country that sometimes feels emotionally cold. Staying with a language long enough for it to stop feeling like a test and start feeling like a home. Standing there 2 weeks ago, I realized something simple and unsettling at the same time. My heart didn't belong to one country anymore. It belonged to the journey between them. And maybe yours does too. 2 weeks before the ceremony. 2 weeks before my naturalization ceremony, I started waking up earlier than usual, not because I was disciplined, but because my brain refused to stay quiet. You know that feeling when your mind opens 30 browser tabs at once and none of them are useful? That was me. Coffee tasted stronger. Time felt thinner. And English, this language I had lived with for years, suddenly felt heavier, like it was watching me back. It's strange how big moments don't arrive with fireworks. They arrive with paperwork, reminders, and a low-level anxiety that follows you into the shower. While washing my hair, I kept rehearsing simple sentences in my head. Yes, I understand. No, thank you. I promise. Not because I would need them, but because my brain associates English with survival. Psychologists call this context-dependent memory. Your mind remembers emotions tied to situations, not just words. For me, English still carried echoes of fear, effort, and proving myself. During those 2 weeks, America felt louder. The news played in the background. Neighbors chatted casually about weather, politics, grocery prices. Policies changed, rules shifted, and people adapted fast. That's another cultural difference no one prepares you for. In many countries, change is discussed emotionally. In the US, it's processed pragmatically. You adjust, or you fall behind. My English learning followed the same rule. There was no pause button. I remember walking outside one morning. The air was dry and cold, the kind that wakes you up without asking permission. In my home country, mornings smelled like food and humidity. Here, mornings smelled like distance. Climate scientists say weather affects mood more than we admit. Cold, dry air increases cortisol levels. Stress hormones rise, patience drops. Combine that with a second language, and suddenly you're not just tired, you're emotionally fragile. No wonder so many immigrants feel exhausted for no clear reason. 2 weeks before the ceremony, memories started visiting me without invitation. The first time I misunderstood a joke and laughed too late. The first argument I lost because I couldn't find the right words fast enough. The first time I realized my personality sounded different in English. Quieter, safer, less sarcastic. Linguists call this personality shift in bilingual speakers. You don't change who you are, but you access different versions of yourself depending on the language. Some versions feel unfinished. At home, my partner noticed the shift before I did. I became quieter, more reflective. Conversations slowed down. Love, when mixed with immigration stress, becomes a language of patience. We talked about the future, about family, about what citizenship really meant. Not the passport but the promise. In English, promises sound very serious. I swear. I pledge. Heavy words. Your brain treats them like contracts. That weight sat on my chest at night. And here's something ironic. The closer I got to becoming official, the more foreign I felt. Sociologists call this the liminal phase, the space between identities. You're no longer who you were, but not fully who you're becoming. Language learners live in this phase constantly. You're not a beginner anymore, but you don't feel fluent. You're functional, but not free. That's the most dangerous place for motivation. Many people quit here because progress becomes invisible. I practiced English less during those 2 weeks, but I used it more. Short conversations. Real emotions. No scripts. Research shows that emotional engagement improves language retention more than repetition. Your brain remembers what mattered, not what was perfect. When I talked about fear, love, or uncertainty, the words stuck. When I studied lists, they slipped away. Real life was teaching me faster than any app ever did. One afternoon, I sat alone in my car after an errand. The radio played an old song I half understood. And suddenly I cried. Not dramatically. Quietly. Because I realized something important. English was no longer the enemy. It was the witness. It saw me struggle, adapt, fall in love, argue, forgive, and keep going. It didn't make my life easier, but it made it possible. If you're listening to this while preparing for something big, a test, an interview, a move, pay attention to your emotions. They are not distractions. They are signals. Your brain is telling you that what you're doing matters. Neuroscience shows that meaning accelerates learning. When English connects to your life, not your ego, it stops feeling like a performance. 2 weeks before my ceremony, I stopped asking, "Is my English good enough?" and started asking, "Can I be honest in it?" That shift changed everything. Because belonging isn't about sounding perfect. It's about being understood when it counts. And as the days moved closer, I felt something unexpected growing inside me. Not confidence. Not pride. But calm. The kind that comes when you realize you don't need to become someone else to stay. You just need to keep showing up, sentence by sentence, breath by breath. That was the real preparation. Weather shock in America. The first time American weather confused me, I thought something was wrong with my body. One morning it was warm enough to open the window. By afternoon, the sky turned gray, the wind sharpened, and my fingers felt like they didn't belong to my hands anymore. You learn very quickly in the US that the weather does not care about your plans, your mood, or your expectations. And strangely, neither does life here. That realization hits language learners harder than they expect. In my home country, seasons arrive slowly, like guests who knock before entering. In America, weather kicks the door open. Climate scientists explain this through geography. Vast land, strong air currents, extreme contrasts. But living inside it feels personal. The sudden cold, the aggressive heat, the dramatic storms. Your nervous system reacts before your brain does. Cortisol rises. Focus drops. And learning a language, which already demands attention, suddenly feels twice as exhausting. 2 weeks before my naturalization ceremony, the weather shifted again. Cold mornings, bright afternoons, freezing nights. I dressed wrong every day. Too light. Too heavy. Always slightly uncomfortable. That physical discomfort mirrored my inner state perfectly. Because adapting to American climate is not just about clothing. It's about mindset. You stop expecting stability. You start preparing for change. Psychologists say the human brain craves predictability. When predictability disappears, anxiety fills the gap. For immigrants and English learners, weather becomes a silent stressor. You don't talk about it, but it affects your energy, your patience, your willingness to speak. On cold days, my English got shorter. Fewer jokes. Less risk. On warm days, words flowed easier. Mood and language are closer than grammar books will ever admit. I remember one winter afternoon, standing at a bus stop, wind cutting through my jacket. A stranger made small talk about the cold. Simple sentences. Easy vocabulary. But my mouth hesitated. Not because I didn't know the words. Because my body was in survival mode. Neuroscience explains this well. When your brain senses physical stress, it redirects energy away from higher functions like language. Your silence is not laziness. It's biology. American culture reflects its climate more than people realize. Fast changes. Strong opinions. Clear reactions. In colder regions, conversations are brief but efficient. In warmer places, people linger, talk more, smile longer. As an English learner, you start noticing these patterns subconsciously. You adjust your tone, your speed, even your personality. Sociologists call this cultural mirroring. You adapt to be accepted, often without realizing it. At first, I blamed myself. I thought my motivation was weak. That my discipline wasn't strong enough. But then I learned something important. Learning capacity is seasonal. Research shows that cognitive performance fluctuates with sunlight exposure and temperature. Less daylight can lower serotonin levels. That affects memory, motivation, and emotional resilience. So if you struggle more with English during certain months, you're not broken. You're human. During those 2 weeks, I started walking every day, even when the weather felt unfriendly. Not for exercise. For exposure. I listened to English podcasts while walking, letting the rhythm of footsteps calm my nervous system. This is not poetic advice. It's neurological. Movement regulates the brain. When your body feels safer, your language improves. Sudelli. Sentences come easier. One evening, the temperature dropped suddenly. I stood outside, watching my breath turn visible. And I thought about how many times I had felt invisible because my English was slow. Weather teaches humility. It reminds you that control is limited. Acceptance, however, is powerful. Once I stopped fighting the discomfort, I stopped blaming my English for everything. Here's a practical truth many learners miss. Environment shapes output. If you want better English, don't only change your study method. Change your physical state. Warm your body. Calm your breathing. Reduce sensory overload. Research in embodied cognition shows that language processing improves when the body feels regulated. A calm body creates a flexible mind. America's weather didn't just challenge me. It trained me. It taught me to stay present in discomfort. To notice small changes. To adapt quickly. Those skills transferred directly into language learning. I became less afraid of mistakes. less attached to perfection, more focused on communication. Standing there, 2 weeks before my ceremony, I realized something quietly powerful. I had survived seasons that tried to push me back into silence. And every time, I spoke anyway. Not fluently, not confidently, but honestly. And maybe that's the real lesson hidden inside the weather. Belonging doesn't mean feeling comfortable all the time. It means learning how to stay, even when the temperature drops. Learning English in real life. At some point, English quietly leaves the classroom and starts following you into places where you didn't invite it. The parking lot, the elevator, the awkward silence between "hi" and "have a nice day." That's when learning English stops being a subject and turns into a lifestyle. And honestly, that's when most people panic. Because real life doesn't slow down for your vocabulary. 2 weeks before my naturalization ceremony, I realized I wasn't studying English anymore. I was negotiating life with it. Short conversations. Unclear accents. People talking while chewing gum. The kind of English no textbook dares to include. Linguists call this authentic input, and your brain loves and hates it at the same time. Loves it because it's real. Hates it because it's unpredictable. I remember standing in line at a grocery store, exhausted, just wanting to go home. The cashier smiled and said something fast. My brain caught only half the sentence. That familiar heat rose in my chest, the one that says, "You're about to mess this up." But instead of freezing, I asked, "Sorry, can you say that again?" Simple. Human. And nothing bad happened. This tiny moment rewired something in me. Psychologists call this exposure with safety. When you survive a feared situation, your brain updates its threat map. Real-life English is not about saying impressive things. It's about responding when you don't fully understand. Most learners think fluency is speed. It's not. Fluency is recovery. How fast you come back after confusion. Native speakers get confused too. They just don't panic about it. In daily life, English shows up disguised as small talk. Weather comments. Compliments. Complaints. In American culture, these moments are social glue. You're not expected to be deep. You're expected to be present. When I stopped trying to sound smart and started trying to sound available, conversations became easier. Sociolinguists explain this as phatic communication. Language used to build connection, not exchange information. 2 weeks before the ceremony, my neighbors talked more. Maybe I listened better. Or maybe I finally allowed myself to be imperfect out loud. We discussed weather, lawns, delivery delays. Boring topics. Powerful practice. Repetition in context strengthens neural pathways far better than isolated study. Your brain remembers patterns tied to emotion and familiarity. There's an uncomfortable truth about real-life English. It exposes your identity gaps. In your native language, you know who you are. Funny, serious, sarcastic. In English, those traits arrive late. Sometimes years late. This delay can feel like loss. But neuroscience shows that personality expression is language dependent. You're not less yourself, you're under construction. I noticed that my English voice changed depending on where I was. Confident at home. Careful at work. Polite in public offices. This isn't weakness. It's adaptability. Americans do this too. They just don't notice because it's their first language. Code switching is a skill, not a flaw. One afternoon, I had to call a customer service line. Long wait. Automated voice. Options spoken too fast. Old fear resurfaced. But I stayed. Breathing slow. Notes ready. When a real human answered, my English wasn't perfect, but it worked. Afterward, my heart raced like I had run a mile. That physical reaction matters. Your body celebrates survival before your mind celebrates success. Learning English in real life is tiring because it demands vulnerability. You risk misunderstanding. You risk sounding simple. You risk being judged. But research in second language acquisition shows that willingness to communicate predicts progress more than grammar knowledge. Courage beats correctness every time. I stopped asking myself, did I say that right? And started asking, did they understand me? That shift reduced anxiety. Anxiety blocks language processing. Calm opens it. This is why children learn languages faster. They're not protecting an identity yet. Here's a practical strategy that changed everything for me. I started collecting sentences, not words. Real sentences I heard in real places. Short. Useful. Emotional. Your brain stores language in chunks. This is called formulaic language. It reduces cognitive load and increases confidence. You don't build fluency one word at a time. You build it one situation at a time. 2 weeks before my ceremony, English felt less like a test and more like a companion. Sometimes annoying. Sometimes helpful. Always present. I realized I didn't need perfect English to belong. I needed functional courage. Real life didn't wait for my fluency. It invited me anyway. And when I accepted that invitation, English stopped being something I chased, and became something I lived. Cultural silence and loneliness. Loneliness in a new country doesn't announce itself loudly. It doesn't knock on the door. It sits quietly next to you while you're scrolling your phone, pretending you're just tired. Cultural loneliness is especially sneaky because on the outside, everything looks fine. You have a place to live. You know enough English to survive. People are polite. And yet, something feels empty. 2 weeks before my naturalization ceremony, that feeling resurfaced unexpectedly. Not because something went wrong, but because nothing was happening. In American culture, silence often means independence. People respect your space. They don't ask too many personal questions. This is considered kindness. But if you come from a culture where connection is built through shared silence, constant checking, and emotional closeness, this kind of politeness can feel like abandonment. I remember my early days in the US, sitting in a room full of people, understanding most of the words but none of the meaning. Jokes landed, laughter followed, and I smiled half a second late. That delay is small, but your brain notices. Neuroscientists explain this through social timing. Humans bond through synchronized reactions. When your timing is off, your nervous system registers it as exclusion, even if no one intends it. Language is only half the barrier. Culture is the invisible wall. Americans value clarity, boundaries, and efficiency. In many conversations, people say exactly what they mean, and nothing more. No hidden messages. No emotion el subtext. For someone used to reading between the lines, this can feel cold. You start wondering if people don't like you, when in reality, they just assume you're fine. 2 weeks before the ceremony, I stood in a public office waiting room. Everyone sat quietly, eyes on phones, headphones in. No small talk. No shared complaints. In my home country, this silence would be awkward. Here, it was normal. Sociologists call this low-context communication. Information is explicit, not implied. Silence is neutral, not hostile. Understanding this intellectually is easy. Feeling it emotionally takes years. Loneliness deepens when your English limits your emotional range. You can explain facts, but feelings come out simplified. I'm okay. I'm tired. It's fine. English becomes a filter, reducing complex emotions into manageable sentences. Psychologists warn that emotional compression can increase isolation. When you can't fully express sadness or humor, people connect with a smaller version of you. I noticed this most in moments of conflict. In my native language, I could argue passionately and repair quickly. In English, I avoided conflict altogether. Not because I didn't care, but because I lacked the tools. Silence became protection. But silence also became distance. Research on immigrant mental health shows that language barriers amplify loneliness, even among socially active individuals. You may talk to people all day and still feel unseen. The brain craves emotional resonance, not just interaction. That's why small misunderstandings hurt more than big ones. They accumulate quietly. During those 2 weeks, I became more aware of how often I stayed quiet when I wanted to speak. At the store. at gatherings, even at home. Not silence from shyness, but from calculation. Is this worth the effort? Will I explain it wrong? Cognitive scientists call this effort avoidance. When communication feels costly, the brain chooses silence. But here's what changed. I started naming the loneliness instead of hiding it. Not dramatically. Casually. Sometimes I feel quiet here. That sentence wasn't perfect, but it was honest. Honesty creates connection faster than fluency. Social psychology confirms this. Self-disclosure builds trust, even in simple language. I also learned that American culture expresses care differently. Instead of asking about your feelings, people offer help through action. Rides, information, practical advice. Once I recognized this, I stopped interpreting silence as indifference. Cultural literacy reduced emotional pain more than vocabulary ever did. If you're learning English and feeling lonely, understand this. Loneliness is not proof that you don't belong. It's proof that you are transitioning. Identity takes time to rebuild in a new language. Your brain is working overtime, even when it feels like nothing is happening. 2 weeks before my ceremony, I realized something quietly important. I was no longer lonely because I was invisible. I was lonely because I was becoming visible in a new way, and visibility takes adjustment. Belonging doesn't arrive all at once. It grows slowly, through misunderstood jokes, quiet rooms, and small brave sentences spoken into silence. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can say in a new language is simply, I feel alone. Love across languages. Love sounds confident in movies. Smooth sentences. Perfect timing. In real life, especially in a second language, love stumbles. It repeats itself. It searches for words and sometimes settles for the wrong ones. When you fall in love across languages, you quickly learn that grammar is optional, but honesty is not. 2 weeks before my naturalization ceremony, I found myself replaying old conversations with my partner. Not the romantic ones. The clumsy ones. The moments when my English failed, but the feeling didn't. Psychologists say memory favors emotionally charged events. Your brain keeps them because they taught you something important. For me, those memories taught me that love does not require fluency. It requires presence. In the beginning, my English was careful. Too careful. Every sentence felt like a potential misunderstanding. I spoke slower than my thoughts, softer than my emotions. In my native language, I'm expressive, sarcastic, sometimes dramatic. In English, I became minimal. Researchers call this emotional attenuation in second language speakers. You feel the emotion fully, but you express it in a smaller container. Our early conversations were simple. How was your day? Are you tired? Do you want to eat? short sentences, repeated often, linguistically boring, emotionally rich. Neuroscience shows that repetition with emotional safety strengthens attachment. The words themselves matter less than the feeling attached to them. But love across languages also brings misunderstandings that hurt more than usual. Tone mistakes, cultural assumptions, silence interpreted the wrong way. In American culture, directness equals honesty. In many other cultures, indirectness equals care. When these styles collide, conflict appears where no one intended it. I once stayed quiet to avoid saying the wrong thing. My partner heard distance. That silence lasted longer than it should have. 2 weeks before the ceremony, we talked about that period openly. In English. Slowly. Pausing often. Repairing old moments. Relationship research shows that successful couples are not those who avoid conflict, but those who repair effectively. Language barriers make repair harder, but not impossible. You don't need perfect sentences. You need willingness. One unexpected gift of loving in English was clarity. English forces you to be specific. I feel hurt. I need time. I didn't understand. There is less room for emotional poetry, but more room for emotional accuracy. Over time, this changed how I communicated even in my native language. Love became less dramatic, more intentional. There were moments when I felt smaller in English, less charming, less funny, and I worried, what if this version of me isn't enough? Psychologists call this identity vulnerability. You fear being loved for an incomplete self. But here's the truth love taught me. The person who stays while you search for words is seeing your truest form. During those 2 weeks, I noticed how our relationship had become bilingual in its own way. Some emotions expressed better in English. Some better without words at all. Touch filled the gaps language couldn't reach. Human connection doesn't rely solely on speech. Nonverbal communication carries emotion faster than language ever could. Learning English through love accelerated everything. Motivation skyrocketed. Emotional investment improves memory retention. This is not romantic theory. It's cognitive science. When words are tied to someone you care about, your brain tags them as important. Vocabulary learned through love sticks. But love also exposed my fears. Fear of being misunderstood forever. Fear of never fully expressing myself. Fear that English would always filter my emotions. 2 weeks before the ceremony, I realized those fears were outdated. My English had grown alongside the relationship. So had my confidence. Marriage, or long-term partnership, in a second language is a constant negotiation of roles, expectations, cultural habits. You argue about dishes and discover you're actually arguing about values. American culture emphasizes independence. Many other cultures emphasize interdependence. Language becomes the battlefield where these values clash. Learning to name these differences saved us from blaming each other. If you're learning English and dreaming of love, or already in it, remember this: vulnerability is attractive in every language. Perfect grammar is not. People connect with effort, not polish. Relationship therapists agree. Emotional attunement matters more than eloquence. 2 weeks before my naturalization ceremony, love felt quieter than before. Deeper. Less performative. English had stopped being a barrier and started being a bridge. Not a beautiful bridge, but a strong one. Love didn't ask me to sound native. It asked me to stay honest. And in that honesty, across languages, I found a home I didn't know I was building. Marriage under pressure. Marriage is hard in one language. Add immigration, cultural differences, and English as a second language, and suddenly your relationship feels like it's living inside a pressure cooker. Not exploding. Just constantly hissing. Quiet stress. Invisible weight. 2 weeks before my naturalization ceremony, I realized how much pressure our marriage had absorbed without making noise. Bills. Paperwork. Deadlines. Policies. American systems love forms, rules, and precision. They don't care if you're tired or emotional. They want boxes checked correctly. For native speakers, this is annoying. For immigrants, it's exhausting. And exhaustion leaks into marriage. There were days when English felt less like a tool and more like a test I could never fully pass. Conversations about money, insurance, taxes, topics that are already sensitive, became heavier in a second language. I spoke slower. I chose safer words. But safety can sound like distance. Relationship psychologists call this emotional undercommunication. You say enough to function, but not enough to connect. American culture encourages self-reliance. Couples are expected to manage independently. Asking for help is often framed as weakness. In many other cultures, marriage is communal. Family steps in. Advice flows freely. In the US, silence often means respect. In my marriage, silence sometimes meant confusion. Navigating that gap required more than vocabulary. It required cultural translation. 2 weeks before the ceremony, we argued about something small. Something forgettable. But the tension underneath was not small. It was years of adaptation. Years of explaining. Years of feeling like one of us had to slow down while the other waited. Neuroscience explains why stress makes communication worse. Under pressure, the brain prioritizes survival over empathy. Tone sharpens. Listening narrows. What saved us wasn't better English. It was better pacing. We learned to slow conversations down intentionally. Pause. Repeat. Clarify. Research in couples therapy shows that slowing speech reduces conflict escalation, especially in multilingual relationships. When language processing demands drop, emotional understanding rises. Marriage under pressure exposes cultural assumptions you didn't know you had. Who handles finances? How decisions are made. What support looks like. In English, these assumptions come out bluntly. I need space. I need help. Heavy sentences. Direct. American English doesn't hide much. That honesty can feel harsh, but it's efficient. Once I stopped taking directness personally, conflicts shortened. There were moments I felt unequal. Not intellectually. Emotionally. My partner could express frustration fully. I needed time. That imbalance created guilt. Psychologists call this asymmetric emotional expression. It's common in bilingual couples. The key is not equality of words, but equality of effort. Effort can be seen, even when language is imperfect. 2 weeks before the ceremony, we revisited old decisions. Why we stayed. Why we struggled. Why we didn't quit. Not romantically. Practically. That practicality is something American culture taught me. Love here survives through systems, calendars, shared responsibilities, clear communication. Romance lives inside structure, not outside it. English forced us to be explicit about expectations. No hints. No assumptions. This was uncomfortable at first, but it reduced resentment. Resentment grows in ambiguity. Clarity, even awkward clarity, protects relationships. Marriage counselors emphasize this constantly, but it hits differently when English itself is the obstacle. Pressure also revealed our strengths. Humor survived. Kindness remained. On hard days, a simple sentence carried weight. We're on the same team. Short. Clear. Powerful. Your brain responds well to simplicity under stress. Complex language fails when emotions run high. If you're learning English inside a marriage, understand this. Struggles don't mean incompatibility. They often mean transition. You're not just learning a language. You're rebuilding communication habits from the ground up. That takes time. 2 weeks before my naturalization ceremony, marriage felt less like a romantic ideal and more like a shared project. And that's not a disappointment. It's maturity. Projects survive pressure through maintenance, not fantasy. We didn't become stronger by avoiding stress. We became stronger by translating it into words we could both understand. Marriage under pressure doesn't break you. It teaches you where to speak slower, listen deeper, and choose each other, again and again. Raising a family in America. Raising a family in America teaches you one lesson very early. Nothing is truly private anymore. Not your schedule, not your emotions, and definitely not your language. Children pull English out of you in ways textbooks never could. Fast, loud, unforgiving, loving. 2 weeks before my naturalization ceremony, I watched my child explain something to me using words I didn't know yet. Not complicated words. Everyday ones. The kind you never study because they feel too basic to matter. And suddenly, roles flipped. I was the learner again. But this time, learning didn't feel humiliating. It felt necessary. In America, children absorb language like the weather. They don't ask permission. They don't translate. They don't hesitate. Cognitive scientists explain this through neuroplasticity. Young brains are optimized for pattern recognition without fear. Adults, on the other hand, carry identity. Fear of mistakes. Fear of sounding stupid. Parenting in a second language confronts that fear daily. School emails. Parent-teacher meetings. Forms. Policies. Everything comes in English, wrapped in polite professionalism. Not aggressive. Not emotional. Just firm. American systems are built on clarity and liability. Every sentence matters. Every signature counts. As a parent, you don't get to opt out of English. Love pushes you forward even when confidence lags behind. I remember the first school meeting I attended. Chairs too small. Smiles too polite. Acronyms everywhere. My English worked, but slowly. I nodded more than I spoke. Later, I replayed the conversation in my head, correcting sentences that were already gone. Linguists call this delayed self-monitoring. You understand after the moment has passed. It's frustrating. But it's also learning in motion. Raising children in America also exposes cultural contrasts sharply. Independence is encouraged early. Kids speak up. Ask questions. Challenge ideas. In many cultures, this would be considered disrespectful. Here, it's confidence building. Watching my child navigate this made me rethink my own silence. Maybe quiet wasn't always wisdom. Maybe sometimes it was habit. English entered our home differently through children. Faster. Messier. Funnier. Songs. Slang. School phrases. Language learning became less formal and more chaotic. Research shows that emotional context accelerates acquisition. Laughing over mispronunciations creates stronger memory than drills ever could. But there's a quiet fear many immigrant parents carry, losing connection. When children grow comfortable in English, your native language can start to feel fragile. Conversations shorten. Translations appear. Identity shifts. Psychologists call this language gap anxiety. You worry not about losing language, but losing closeness. 2 weeks before the ceremony, I realized something grounding. Language isn't the only bridge. Values travel without words. Patience, respect, curiosity. These survive translation. Children don't inherit accents. They inherit behavior. When I listened fully, even in imperfect English, connection remained intact. Family life in America is structured by time. Calendars rule everything. Pick-up times, bedtimes, app notifications. This structure initially felt cold, but it created predictability. Predictability reduces stress, and reduced stress improves communication. Science confirms this. Stable routines free cognitive resources. More energy for language. More space for emotion. There were evenings when I felt like I failed as a parent because I couldn't explain something beautifully in English. Homework questions. Big feelings. Complex topics. But children don't need perfect explanations. They need presence. Developmental psychology emphasizes this repeatedly. Emotional availability matters more than verbal precision. Raising a family also forces you into community. Playgrounds, school events, casual conversations with other parents. These interactions are low stakes but powerful. Real-life English practice disguised as small talk. Over time, fear faded. Familiarity replaced anxiety. The brain relaxes when patterns repeat. 2 weeks before my ceremony, I noticed my English felt different at home. Softer. More flexible. Less guarded. Family environments create psychological safety. Safety enhances learning. That's not motivational advice, it's neuroscience. The brain learns best where it feels accepted. America teaches children to ask, why? That question slowly entered my own English. I stopped memorizing rules and started understanding reasons. Language became less about correctness and more about clarity. Parenting reshaped my learning mindset. There's a moment many immigrant parents experience. Your child corrects your English, not cruelly, just casually. It stings. Then it passes. And then pride arrives. Because their fluency is not your failure. It's your contribution. 2 weeks before my naturalization ceremony, I understood this deeply. My English didn't need to be perfect to build a family here. It needed to be alive. Used. Shared. Forgiven. Raising a family in America didn't erase where I came from. It layered it. English didn't replace my identity. It expanded it. One bedtime story, one school email, one imperfect sentence at a time. And in that expansion, I didn't lose myself. I multiplied. English as emotional survival. At some point, English stopped being something I studied and started being something I needed. Not for work. Not for paperwork. But for emotional survival. When life presses in and your old language is far away, the new one becomes a lifeline, even if it's frayed. 2 weeks before my naturalization ceremony, I noticed how often English carried my most vulnerable moments. Doctors' offices. Serious conversations. Unexpected phone calls. In those moments, language isn't about fluency. It's about staying present while your heart races. Neuroscientists explain that under emotional stress, the brain narrows attention. Simple language becomes more effective than complex expression. Early on, English felt like a barrier between my feelings and the world. I could feel deeply but explain shallowly. I'm okay. It's fine. These phrases became emotional bandages. Functional, but thin. Over time, though, those same phrases became bridges. Because even limited language, used consistently, creates connection. American culture encourages naming emotions directly. I feel stressed. I'm overwhelmed. I need support. In some cultures, emotions are shown through behavior, not stated aloud. Learning to say them felt unnatural at first. But psychology research shows that labeling emotions reduces their intensity. This process, called affect labeling, helps regulate the nervous system. English gave me new tools to manage feelings, not just express them. 2 weeks before the ceremony, I had a difficult conversation I couldn't postpone anymore. In English. Slowly. Imperfectly. But honestly. I didn't search for elegant sentences. I chose clear ones. The relief afterward was physical. My shoulders dropped. Breathing slowed. The body recognizes emotional release before the mind does. Learning English as emotional survival means accepting imperfection. Emotional moments don't wait for grammar. They arrive fast and loud. If you try to speak perfectly, you often say nothing. Silence protects pride, but it starves connection. Research in communication psychology shows that emotional disclosure strengthens resilience, even when language is limited. I realized that my English voice sounded different when I talked about feelings. Softer. Slower. Less guarded. This wasn't weakness. It was alignment. Your brain processes emotional language differently from factual language. Tone matters more than structure. Authenticity beats accuracy. There were times I wished I could borrow my native language just to feel fully understood. But English taught me something unexpected. Understanding is often negotiated, not delivered. You check. You clarify. You try again. This back and forth builds intimacy. Perfect language skips that process. Imperfect language invites collaboration. 2 weeks before my ceremony, I reflected on moments when English helped me survive emotionally. apologizing, setting boundaries, asking for help. These actions require courage in any language. In a second language, they require double courage. But each time I did it, my confidence grew, not linguistic confidence, but personal confidence. If you're learning English and feel emotionally blocked, know this: your brain associates language with past stress. It remembers fear, embarrassment, failure. These memories can resurface unexpectedly. Trauma-informed education explains that emotional safety must be restored before learning can continue. Be patient with yourself. Your silence may be self-protection, not lack of effort. Here's something practical that helped me. I practiced emotional sentences out loud when I was calm. Not dramatic ones. Real ones. I need more time. I don't feel comfortable. I appreciate you. Rehearsing emotional language reduces cognitive load during real moments. This is backed by behavioral science. Preparation lowers anxiety. American English values clarity over subtlety. This can feel blunt, but it reduces emotional guessing. Over time, I learned to appreciate this. Emotional survival became easier when I didn't have to decode hidden meanings. Directness created safety. 2 weeks before the ceremony, I noticed English no longer triggered panic in emotional moments. It still felt slower than my native language, but it worked. It carried my feelings across gaps. That's all language needs to do. Emotional survival doesn't require eloquence. It requires honesty, timing, and presence. English didn't make me stronger. It revealed strength I already had, waiting for words. When you stop treating English as a performance and start using it as a tool, something shifts. Fear loosens. Voice steadies. Connection grows. 2 weeks before I became a citizen, I realized something simple and grounding. English was no longer just a skill I practiced. It was a place I could stand, imperfect but real, when emotions demanded to be heard. And sometimes, that's enough to survive. The Naturalization Day. The day of my naturalization ceremony didn't feel dramatic when I woke up. No fireworks. No music swelling in the background. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you notice your breathing, your thoughts, your doubts. I put on clean clothes, checked my documents twice, and stood still for a moment, asking myself a strange question. How did English carry me all the way here? Outside, the weather was undecided. Not warm. Not cold. A very American compromise. As I walked toward the building, my steps felt heavier than usual. Not from fear, but from accumulation. Years of learning. Years of misunderstanding. Years of speaking slowly while thinking fast. Neuroscientists say the brain compresses long journeys into emotional snapshots. That morning, everything compressed into one feeling, arrival. Inside the room, chairs were arranged in neat rows. People sat quietly, some smiling, some staring forward. Accents floated in the air: Spanish, Mandarin, Arabic, Vietnamese, English shaped by many lives. This was not a room of perfect speakers. It was a room of survivors. And suddenly, I felt less alone than I ever had. As the ceremony began, instructions were given in clear, careful English. Simple sentences. Slow pace. Inclusive language. This wasn't accidental. Public institutions understand something language learners often forget: comprehension matters more than complexity. That realization hit me harder than expected. English, when used with intention, can welcome instead of intimidate. While waiting, my mind drifted back to earlier versions of myself. The one who avoided phone calls. The one who rehearsed sentences before entering a room. The one who felt smaller every time words came out wrong. Psychologists call this self-narrative integration. Big life moments force you to reconcile who you were with who you are becoming. When it was time to stand, I stood. When it was time to repeat the oath, I spoke. Slowly. Clearly. Not perfectly. But with meaning. The words were heavy. Allegiance. Responsibility. Commitment. These are not casual terms. Your brain treats them as moral anchors. Saying them in English felt symbolic, not because English is superior, but because it had witnessed my transformation. I noticed something surprising during the oath. My voice didn't shake. Not because I wasn't emotional, but because I was present. Mindfulness researchers explain this well. When attention anchors in the body, anxiety loses its grip. I wasn't thinking about accent or grammar. I was thinking about truth. Around me, people spoke at different speeds, with different rhythms. No one sounded the same. And yet, the meaning was shared. This is the quiet miracle of language. Unity does not require uniformity. That room proved it. As the ceremony ended, applause filled the space. Polite. Brief. American. And then it was over. No dramatic goodbye. No transformation glow. Just people gathering belongings and heading back to life. That normalcy mattered. Belonging is not a spotlight. It's continuity. Outside, I paused. Just for a second. To feel the air. To let the moment land. 2 weeks earlier, I had worried about whether my English was enough. Standing there, I realized that question no longer mattered. English had done its job. Not by being perfect, but by being persistent. Citizenship didn't erase my accent. It didn't rewrite my past. It didn't suddenly make English effortless. What it did was confirm something internal. I had stayed. Through confusion. Through silence. Through discomfort. Language didn't carry me forward alone. I carried it with me. If you're learning English and dreaming of a future moment, an interview, a move, a ceremony, know this: the moment won't test your perfection. It will reflect your persistence. Research on achievement psychology shows that consistency predicts success more reliably than talent. That room was proof. Walking away from the building, life resumed immediately. Traffic, notifications, responsibilities. But something subtle had shifted. English no longer felt like a gatekeeper. It felt like a record of every time I didn't quit. The ceremony didn't answer the question, "Where does your heart belong?" It reframed it. My heart belonged to the process, to the courage of showing up before readiness, to speaking before certainty. And as I walked forward, documents in hand, I understood this clearly. The real oath I had taken wasn't just to a country. It was to myself, to keep using my voice, in whatever language I had, even when it felt imperfect. Because that voice had already brought me home, where my heart truly belongs. After the naturalization ceremony ended, no one told me how I was supposed to feel. There was no instruction sheet. No emotional roadmap. Just a quiet walk back to the car and a strange sense of lightness, like something heavy had been set down without anyone noticing. That's when the real question returned, not loudly, not dramatically, but honestly: where does my heart truly belong now? 2 weeks earlier, I thought the ceremony would answer that for me. That standing in a room, saying the right words, holding the right documents, would settle something deep inside. But identity doesn't work like paperwork. Psychologists explain that identity is layered, not replaced. New roles don't erase old ones. They sit on top, sometimes uncomfortably, until the layers learn how to coexist. Driving home, English played softly on the radio. I understood most of it. Missed some jokes. That familiar rhythm of partial comprehension felt oddly comforting. It reminded me that I didn't suddenly become someone else. I was still me, just expanded. Accents intact. Memories intact. Heart complicated. Belonging is often misunderstood as location. A country. A flag. A passport. But neuroscience suggests belonging is actually a nervous system response. Your body relaxes when it feels safe, recognized, and allowed to exist without constant explanation. That feeling doesn't arrive automatically with citizenship. It arrives slowly, through repetition. In the days after the ceremony, people congratulated me. "You must feel proud. You're finally American." These sentences were kind, but incomplete. Pride existed, yes. Gratitude too. But finally felt inaccurate. I hadn't arrived at an ending. I had crossed into a new middle. I noticed my English felt different. Not smoother. Not faster. just less defensive. I spoke without rehearsing as much. I paused without apologizing. That shift mattered more than fluency. Psychologists call this reduced self-monitoring. When fear decreases, authenticity increases. At home, family life continued unchanged. Dishes, schedules, conversations about nothing. That normalcy grounded me. Big identity shifts need ordinary routines to stabilize. Without them, your mind spins stories that don't serve you. Stability helps integration. Where my heart belongs became clearer through small moments. Laughing at a joke without translating. Feeling tired in English and letting that be okay. Choosing silence without shame. These were signs of internal belonging. I wasn't performing identity anymore. I was living it. But here's the part that surprised me most. My connection to my home country didn't weaken. It softened. Nostalgia became less sharp, more reflective. Research on migration psychology shows that secure attachment to a new place reduces emotional conflict with the old one. Belonging is not a zero-sum game. English played a strange role in this realization. It became the language I used to understand myself differently. Not better. Differently. Some thoughts only existed in English now. More direct. Less emotional. Some stayed in my native language. Richer. Deeper. Both were true. Both were mine. 2 weeks before the ceremony, I feared losing myself in English. Standing after it, I realized the opposite had happened. English hadn't erased my identity. It had exposed parts of it that were always there. Resilience, adaptability, patience. Belonging, I learned, is not about choosing one place over another. It's about permission. Permission to be layered. To be unfinished. To belong in movement. Sociologists call this hybrid identity. I call it relief. If you're learning English and wondering whether it will cost you who you are, listen carefully. Language doesn't take. It reveals. It asks you to slow down, to choose words intentionally, to listen harder. In that process, you don't disappear. You sharpen. My heart belongs where effort meets meaning. Where language is used not to impress, but to connect. Where mistakes don't disqualify you from being heard. That place is not a country. It's a practice. And that practice travels with you. As days passed, the ceremony faded into memory, but its lessons stayed. Belonging isn't granted. It's built. Through staying when it's uncomfortable. Through speaking when it's easier to hide. Through allowing yourself to be both foreign and familiar at the same time. That's where my heart belongs now. Right there in between. A gentle, hopeful ending. There is a quiet moment that comes after every long journey, when nothing dramatic happens, but everything feels different. No hablos. no announcement. Just a soft realization settling into your body. For me, that moment arrived days after the ceremony, not during it. Standing in my kitchen. Ordinary light. Ordinary morning. And suddenly, English felt calm. Not exciting. Not scary. Just there. 2 weeks earlier, I thought the ending of this story would be clear and emotional, like a movie scene. But real endings don't work that way. Psychology tells us the brain processes closure slowly. We don't feel finished right away. We integrate. We test the new reality in small ways. We speak. We listen. We notice what no longer hurts. I spoke English that morning without thinking about my accent. That alone felt radical. For years, my brain had treated English like a fragile object. Handle carefully, don't drop, don't embarrass yourself. That vigilance drains energy. Neuroscientists call it cognitive load. When it lifts, even slightly, your mind feels lighter. This is why so many English learners feel tired all the time. It's not the language itself. It's the self-monitoring. The constant inner voice asking, was that right? Did I sound stupid? Did they notice? Over time, that voice quiets. Not because you become perfect, but because you become kinder to yourself. I want to tell you something honestly, as someone who stood exactly where you might be standing now, you don't suddenly become confident. Confidence sneaks up on you. One day, you realize you didn't replay a conversation. Another day, you forget to translate in your head. These are not small victories. They are signs your nervous system feels safer. The ending of my story isn't about citizenship. It's about permission. Permission to speak English without waiting for approval. Permission to belong without proof. Educational psychology confirms this. Learners progress faster when they stop seeking external validation and start trusting internal feedback. If you are learning English and feel stuck, bored, discouraged, or secretly ashamed of how slow it feels, let me reframe that for you gently. Slowness is not failure. Slowness is processing. Your brain is building something durable, not flashy. Durable things take time. I think about all the versions of myself who almost quit. The one overwhelmed by climate shock. The one lonely in silent rooms. The one afraid to love imperfectly. The one exhausted by pressure and responsibility. English didn't rescue those versions. Persistence did. And here's the science behind hope. Motivation doesn't come before action. It comes after. Behavioral studies show that action creates momentum, not the other way around. So if you're waiting to feel ready before continuing English, you might be waiting forever. Read one sentence. Listen for 5 minutes. Speak one honest thought. That's enough to restart the cycle. This story had a happy ending not because everything became easy, but because I stopped expecting ease. I expected meaning instead. Meaning gives discomfort a purpose. And purpose makes effort sustainable. Where does your heart belong? Maybe it doesn't belong to a country yet. Maybe it belongs to a future version of you who hasn't given up. Maybe it belongs to this quiet practice of listening, reading, speaking, slowly, imperfectly, honestly. If you take anything from this video, let it be this: English is not judging you. People are not waiting for you to fail. And your worth is not measured by fluency. Language is a bridge, not a verdict. I didn't arrive at the end of this journey. I arrived at a place where the journey no longer scared me. And that is a kind of home. Maybe the most important thing you noticed by staying until the end is not how well I speak English, but the fact that I didn't give up. English did not change my life in one day. It stayed quietly with me, a little bit every day, long enough for me to change. If you are listening to this video late at night, after a long and tiring day, after asking yourself again and again, is English really for me? Then please remember this one simple truth. You are not slow. You are just on a real path. On this channel, we don't learn English to show off. We learn English to understand, to listen, to speak. And one day, to realize that we are no longer afraid of this language. The next videos on this channel will continue to be real stories, slow and clear English, natural listening, reading, and speaking practice. And most importantly, no pressure, no judgment. If you feel connected to this story, if you want to hear English every day without feeling tired, if you want to speak English with your own feelings, then subscribe to the channel. Turn on the notification bell so you don't miss new videos. And leave a comment below, where are you on your English journey right now? The next video will begin with a very simple question, but one that may stay with you for a long time. If you were no longer afraid to speak English, how differently would you dare to live? I'll see you in the next video. We will continue, slowly, but without stopping.